On behalf of the Lee Summit Arts Council, I'd like to thank you all for including this presentation on tonight's agenda. As you know, the Lee Summit Arts Council was granted funds to complete a cultural arts facility master plan study in fiscal year 2011-12. The Arts Council, in collaboration with the Lee Summit Parks and Recreation Department, was charged with the task of having the study completed by February of 2012. The process was started in May of 2011, and tonight the results of the study will be unveiled. The team of Duncan Webb of Web Management Services and Nestor Bettino of Hoseman Moss Bettino Architecture were very thorough and did a fantastic job. Spending the last 7 months researching the area, interviewing residents and regional representatives, and conducting focus groups to help them better understand the area and the needs of Lee Summit residents. Web Management was chosen to complete this study due to the firm's extensive experience in the development of arts facilities and districts, and for their focus on the advancement of cultural organizations. Thanks to their strong understanding of the Kansas City metropolitan area, following their work with the Kaufman Center for Performing Arts, they are ready to reveal a concrete plan to move Lee Summit forward toward our goal to grow the city's cultural arts. The completion of this study makes our city one step closer to fulfilling the vision outlined in the 2007 Cultural Arts Plan, which was underscored by the Lee Summit 360 Charting Tomorrow Group in 2009. Please welcome the Web Management team.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, staff, citizens of Lee Summit. It's an honor for us to be with you this evening to summarize the results of our work in your community over these last 9 months. I'll now sort of work through a presentation. If I can make it work, good. So our agenda is to introduce our team, the process that we went through, and then we're going to describe the 3 phases of work. The needs assessment, where we considered what, if any, facilities you need, the physical planning associated with that, and then the business planning, and then we'll give you a couple of suggestions as to how you move forward. As has been suggested, my firm is a management consulting practice specializing in the development and operation of cultural facilities. This is all we do. Roaming around North America, working for governments, developers, cultural organizations, and educational institutions, just doing these front-end studies, feasibility studies, master planning, business planning, and strategic planning, just about building and operating cultural facilities. I'm thrilled to have Nestor with me under the name of Foresight, which is his practices, early sort of pre-planning and programming practice, helping me with the physical and location aspects of cultural facilities. The process here was substantial, methodical, and inclusive. We were given the task of moving forward from your 2007 Cultural Arts Master Plan to develop recommendations around cultural facilities, what's needed not just today, but well into the future of your community. Over the past 9 months, and this is my 6th visit to Lee Summit in conjunction with this work, we conducted many individual interviews, focus groups, surveys. We collected information on the community of Lee Summit. We visited with arts organizations, facilities, looked at all your previous plans, and developed research on comparable projects in similar communities. As a result of this work, we are going to present you with 6 different development options and opportunities, and then describe the physical and operational elements of each. So let me now go through the first round of our work, which is essentially whenever you're going to develop any kind of cultural facilities, there are 4 questions that you have to ask and answer. The first question is, who is the audience? So who lives here, who works here, what do they like, what do they want, and what would compel them to get up off the couch to attend or participate in some kind of cultural program? Secondly, what is the level and nature of demand on the part of users? So who are the artists, arts organizations, educational programs, and touring programs that need and want something better than what they currently have? And if you add all of that demand up, does it suggest the need for new or better facilities? The third question is, what facilities do you already have, and what gaps are there in that inventory that we should consider filling with new facilities? So 2 types of demand, audience and user demand against a supply. And then the fourth issue, which is the thing that tends to take us off in these sort of wonderful directions, is we ask, where is your community going, and how might new cultural facilities help you get there? So what are your goals around things like economic development, cultural tourism, creating new educational opportunities, and how might projects like this support those objectives? So this is then the round of work that answers that. As you know, there's a fairly substantial report. I'm just going to give you a few of the highlights of that work along the way. So in the market part, we first of all looked at the size of the market, and this slide is just a quick indicator of the continuing population growth in Lee's Summit as a community. So the market is large. Secondly, the key predictor of participation in the arts is how far people go in school for lots of different reasons. The further you go in your educational attainment, the more likely you are to participate in the performing arts and the visual arts. And this shows a very high level of educational attainment in Lee's Summit. Lee's Summit is of the bars there. The blue is Lee's Summit. The red is a 30-mile radius. The orange is the Kansas City metropolitan area, and the yellow-green is the rest of the country. So that's a very significant difference here in Lee's Summit, with many more people having bachelor's degrees and professional graduate degrees, which suggests to us a high propensity to participate in the arts. We also looked at household income distribution, and here again, Lee's Summit is a significantly more affluent community than the 30-mile radius and metropolitan Kansas City and the rest of the country, which suggests not just participation, but also the likelihood that the citizens of Lee's Summit may be prepared to financially support the development and operation of new cultural facilities. The final slide in this series looks at the age distribution of your community, and here what's most striking is in Lee's Summit the relative number of younger adults and kids. Essentially, this is a community dominated by families, parents and kids, and therefore decisions about what is developed should reflect the needs of that very important group of parents and their children and the kind of programming that they're interested in. The second part of the analysis was looking at that current supply of facilities, and for this we looked and visited all of the facilities being used in Lee's Summit today for cultural programs. Plus, we also surveyed and visited, I think it's about 22 regional facilities that are close enough to Lee's Summit to have a bearing on our analysis. Our conclusion, locally, there's a lack of high-quality, affordable spaces. You have a couple of outdoor facilities that are a little bit busy but are still low to moderate quality. Exhibition facilities, very few and less sort of formal and secure for the presentation of the visual arts, and participatory facilities, places where people rehearse and learn, also a number of gaps in that inventory. Coming then to the question of user demand, we did a very significant online survey, not just of Lee's Summit organizations, but a number of groups in the greater Kansas City metropolitan area. Our first priority is, of course, groups in Lee's Summit, but we're also interested in what groups beyond your community are interested in. And there we see that the most significant demand is for a smaller facility in this sort of fairly broad range of 200 to 600 seats. Really more of the responses are at the lower end of that capacity. And also, interestingly, some demand for outdoor facilities, and also very significant demand for teaching, rehearsal, and other types of programming space. Then the fourth issue, which turns out to be probably the most straightforward in this community, clearly given the master planning work that you've already done and what we've heard about the goals you've set in Lee's Summit, new cultural facilities are in line and will help you get there. They can drive the quality of life, they can help you push forward with downtown revitalization and creating a more vital downtown area, generating evening traffic, growing the downtown employment base, and animating downtown streets and storefronts. We see a significant role for cultural facilities in driving economic development, giving the expenditures associated with participation in cultural programs, and the amount of money that's currently going outside the city, which could theoretically come back in support of culture here. And then also this idea of creating and sustaining a vibrant cultural community, which supports your goal of attracting creative industries to Lee's Summit and creating a place that people want to live and work. So that work led us to the conclusion, coming back to my 4 questions. Yes, the market suggests a strong propensity to participate in the arts. 2, there is a lack of higher quality, affordable facilities. 3, there is significant demand on from local groups, most importantly, but then from other regional groups for more spaces for performance, rehearsal, and education. And 4, new arts facilities can support community goals. That then led us to these recommendations. There are 6 ideas. Of the 6, 5 of them you could proceed with today. And they are, and in no particular order, we haven't prioritized these. A community arts and media center, which is a building or a set of buildings that support a range of community cultural programs, including a 300 to 350 seat theater, flexible rehearsal, performance event space, exhibition space, classrooms. The digital media lab is a particularly important component. Think of it as a set of rooms with lots of equipment where people can express their creativity using electronic media. And we're attracted to that because we think it's a particularly interesting idea, a way to bring younger people to the arts and to arts facilities. It allows them to use their technologies and things they're comfortable with to express themselves. Also, public areas, the idea being that this isn't a building that just opens up in the evening for performances, but it's a building that's always open, always active. We think of it as a 24/7 facility that potentially plays the role of being a community living room. That's project 1. Then we've also suggested improvements to the Legacy Park Amphitheater, new outdoor performance and festival space, artist work cell space, and decentralized program space. And then for the longer term, we come back to one of the questions that motivated this study initially, which was how and when do we get a larger performance hall for Lee Summit? I'm now going to turn it over to Nestor, and he's going to start to describe the physical elements, and I'll jump back in on some of the operating pieces.
Good evening. Let me see if I can figure out where to hold a microphone. Okay. As Duncan described, there's some certain questions that he asked in his study. This portion of it sort of addresses 3 topics: where the facility might be, how large and what kind of spaces the facility might have, and what we might anticipate the facility would cost. So we looked at the first 4 of the 6 items that Duncan identified. So a community arts and media center, we identified starting with the downtown area as a potential location for this, that they would have a centralized location within Lee Summit. We actually looked at some specific locations, the Arnold Hall and the area immediately surrounding it, that block across the street, the United Methodist Church, which is for sale, other sites in downtown that might be available, and a new facility could be built not using any existing construction. And we also looked at the possibility of doing something in conjunction with the Longview Community College out on the campus there. So those were sort of the areas that we looked at. So just to illustrate this, and not to say that this is where we recommended that the community center would go, but just to illustrate what this might be, again, we looked at the different categories that Duncan had talked about that would happen within the community center. So live presentations of movies, films, exhibitions, primarily the visual arts, the media center that Duncan described in some detail, outreach and education initiatives, and then rentals for different nonprofit groups, and then community events and private events that could happen in the facility. So again, this is just an option, but we said, okay, let's take the Arnold Hall site. We know that an amount of work has been done looking at how Arnold Hall might be used. So we looked at it a little bit differently. We said as part of an overall facility, Arnold Hall might play a better role as a large exhibit space, multi-use exhibit space that would work better with the limited height that it has and within the existing constraints of that site. So in this, there might be a large gallery and exhibition space, a small lobby, and some preparation space for the gallery. So this is a little model that we built just to illustrate Arnold Hall. It's about 6,000 square feet, just to give you an idea of how all this comes together. So we identified that this might actually happen as an initial phase, and that during this initial phase, more activities could happen in Arnold Hall. Some performance, both drama and music, could happen there. It's not making it a real theater, but it's just making the acoustics there work and adding enough equipment that it could work as that kind of space. We then looked at a second phase of the Community Arts and Media Center. This is really the bulk of what this piece would be. So we broke it down into two areas. One component that would be a 300 to 350 seat multi-purpose theater, and the spaces that directly support that theater. So this would be the backstage areas, the dressing rooms, a shop, and then the front of house areas that would be a lobby, a cafe, and some catering facilities. The second portion of this, what we're calling Component C, would be the studios and gallery piece of the final facility. So some rehearsal rooms, multi-purpose rehearsal rooms that could be used for a number of different events. They could be used for dance, rehearsal for drama. They could be used for music. The digital media lab, a second gallery space from the one that would be in Arnold Hall in this option. This would be a more formal, very specifically for presentation of visual arts and plastic arts. And then 3 learning spaces. These are really classrooms, but sort of large classrooms, again, that could be used for dance, they could be used for music, they could be used for visual arts, they could be used for drama. And the administrative offices that would support the entire facility. And we identified that the component B, which is the theater, would have a large theater with a full stage house, a reconfigurable room, though, so it's not fixed seating. As this image shows, a theater, a courtyard theater, that the seating is all movable. It can be made a flat floor. It can be made risers. And then the spaces that support it, which are illustrated by those red boxes with the letter B on them. And then the studio space, I'm sorry, so the B is about 34,000 square feet. And for the studio component C, we've identified about 25,000 square feet. So these are the galleries, the classrooms, the spaces that support that. Just as to give you a rough order of magnitude. So I just want to emphasize these are cost models. There's no design, so this isn't a cost estimate, but based on what other facilities of this type cost and based on some assumptions about what the quality of the construction and the amount of equipment in these buildings, we think that in terms of construction, the renovation, making Arnold Hall functional for an exhibit space and some other functions would be about $1 million. That the theater component and its support would be in the neighborhood of about $12.6 million construction cost, including some equipment to run the theater. And then the studios and gallery construction cost would be about $7.3 million. So that's a total of, I think, $20.9 million as a total. We then, again, this is just looking at one option, but seeing how these components might sit on the Arnold Hall site. So Arnold Hall is a little yellow piece in the middle with some green space next to it. And again, this is just one of a lot of different options that we looked at, but that the theater might be along Green Street and that the gallery spaces might be inboard of that block. So again, it's taking up more of that block than what is currently there. This would provide service from the back street and some parking associated with the theaters in the back there. The majority of the parking, we feel, is either on the street or the majority of the parking would use the structured parking, the parking structure here at City Hall, which is a block away.
So just one of the models for this we looked at and people have been referring to over the course of our work is the Community Arts Center in Lawrence, Kansas. So just as a point of reference, this is about a 40,000 square foot building that opened in 2002. It includes a 300-seat theater, second what's called a black box theater, art galleries, studios, dance studios, and classrooms. Very similar building, about sort of 50% smaller than our sort of total program, and correspondingly cheaper to build given the size and when it opened. But it does represent a precedent for this as well, a very successful community-oriented cultural facility that's had a tremendous impact on that community. Okay. Also, for all of these pieces, we thought about how you actually own and operate and staff it. So for the Community Arts Center, and not just for Arnold Hall, but for most of the options, it would be a little bit different if you did it out with the community college, but if it's operated either at these sort of downtown sites, we would recommend that it be operated by the city. We looked at various options, but felt that given the skills you already have here within Parks and Rec and the Parks Board, and your success at operating other civic facilities, we think that the city should be the operator and owner of this building. We've also proceeded with this idea that you develop over time in the Arnold Hall model. We've said that you could theoretically have things up and running in there even by the end of this year, start to do a little bit of programming, and then our business planning is based on the idea that by 2015 you've got the entire building open, all three components that Nestor has described. When that happens, there's a building that costs about $1.6 million a year to operate, and you support that with a combination of earned and contributed income. Earned income, rent, presenting, concessions, and other related fees covers about 2/3 of the operating budget, which means you've got to raise another $600,000 plus a year to sustain it. And the way our model works, that contributed income drops each year in the first 3 years that we looked at. And also important to note that that contributed income is not necessarily the City of Lee Summit's contribution, but it's the entire public and private sector contribution. And for buildings like this, they're able to generate annual support from individuals, foundations, corporations through sponsorship and different levels of government. So this is what we believe to be a relatively sustainable operation. You could operate the building for less money the way you could build it for less money, but we've made it a very active building. There's lots of programming. It serves all corners of your community with relatively inexpensive and accessible program and access to facilities that we think ultimately gives you a sustainable model.
The second piece that we looked at is the green dot on the screen here, which is Legacy Park Amphitheater. So we know that there's a lot out there now in terms of the recreation center and the parking and a platform that starts to describe where the stage might be. So we have listed some additional improvements, a technical structure that could be permanent or demountable, but that would provide a place for lighting and for audio, for speakers associated with performances, a canopy or a shell to go over the open stage, and then potentially some small structures that would be built as part of this amphitheater. So maybe 2 small spaces to either side of the stage that would serve as backstage area for dressing rooms and a small toilet, and then maybe a small piece out at the front where the public is coming in as a box office. And we looked at this, and we think that the construction cost of these components, along with the infrastructure that goes with it, is probably just a little bit less than $750,000. This is, again, one of these little diagrammatic models. This is the image of the amphitheater out there. You can see where the orange piece is, that's the current stage, so the addition of a canopy, and the 2 little green boxes representing some space to either side of that stage, and then the blue box, or the bluish-green box in the foreground being the box office that would serve the amphitheater. The rec center, as you see on the overhead shot, is just to the right of the amphitheater, so some of the facilities could, in fact, be doubled up with the rec center.
This is a great project. You already have this amazing amphitheater in a beautiful location. The landscaping is there. All you have to do is make a relatively small capital investment to improve some of the support facilities, and you're able to really increase the programming and impact that this facility has on your community. And what we're stressing here is that we're not proposing a big sort of entertainment rock and roll amphitheater. It's a place that can support community groups, cultural programs, occasionally films, more modest than sort of what you think of as the big amphitheater programs, but still very impactful and appropriate on that site and not disruptive to the surrounding neighborhoods. We also did an operating pro forma for this. Essentially, it suggests that by the 4th year of operation, this doesn't require any contributed income. It can carry its own way just with earned income by the 4th year.
Then we looked at different outdoor event and festival spaces. So we know that currently you have some events in the plaza outside of City Hall. And also there's been talk about possibly developing a market and some outdoor event space in between the old City Hall and the post office. So we looked at those different places. Again, this is sort of a map indicating within the downtown area some of the spaces that we looked at, potentially for outdoor and festival space. So this is different than Legacy Park. So whereas Legacy Park, the elements are fixed and it's always there, this is really demountable, and it can be set up for different events. It could be set up in different locations with the components that are part of this. There might need to be some infrastructure in different locations to support that, but what we have identified as part of this is a demountable stage, a technical structure like Legacy Park would have, but in this case, it's definitely demountable. But again, this is for lighting and sound. A demountable canopy. In this case, a portable box office. It might be a trailer that gets stored somewhere and gets rolled out to the site. And some portable changing rooms, and then the electrical and plumbing infrastructure that would be required to support these pieces that would move in. So again, some of the places that we looked at, the old City Hall location and the adjacent to the new City Hall. And again, doing a very rough cost model, we think that the work associated with this, these movable pieces and the infrastructure, is probably in the range of $350,000. A little model, again, illustrating this, in this case illustrating it as part of the plaza outside City Hall. So the little, on the right-hand image, the little orange piece with the white on top would be the stage. The blue piece is a little trailer that you pull up alongside of it to serve as a backstage area, and the green box in the foreground would be a box office that you move into place. You can see peeking out of the bottom there, Arnold Hall. Then another component that we thought was really important was we had been looking at things that were primarily in the downtown area where we would be recommending them. And we know how large the physical extent of the city is, of Lee Summit. So through conversations that we had with some staff members, the notion came up of how do you get some of the arts and cultural programs out into the community, more into the neighborhoods. So we developed this notion of a decentralized program space. It's not freestanding. It would be developed as part of other facilities. So those facilities could be city recreation centers. They could be libraries developed by the Mid-Continent Library System. And so that these would be a little suite that we would identify that could then be part of other projects. So the idea is to create additional teaching and rehearsing space. So these are very flexible spaces. They're a large classroom. Again, they can be used for visual arts, for dance. They can be used for drama, for music. And that they would be done in conjunction with other entities. So again, the library system, community college, school district. And so it's a large space, storage that goes with it, a washroom to clean up the mess that people make in the space, a small office. And the assumption is that this doesn't have its own mechanical or support systems. It's really part of a larger facility. So as we've described it here, again, each one of these components might add somewhere in the range of $350,000 or $340,000 to an already developing project. So these would not be standalone.
Right. So the last of these projects is something we're calling the Artist Work Cell Space. And that means recruiting a set of visual artists who are prepared to work in open studios and who are also interested in selling their work out of those studios. We've seen this work in a number of communities. It's a very low-cost, short-term way to animate a downtown area with cultural programming. The idea is you find underutilized or unused spaces, pop-up studios, second floors on Main Street that are available for sort of short to mid-term, and you make deals with artists to move into them. So we created a little scenario here where we put together, assembled enough real estate where you could have 10 of these little studios, which are only 200 square feet each, essentially, very sort of small spaces. But then lobby cafe, a classroom, a common gallery, and a little retail outlet. So the idea is that you make arrangements with these artists to move in, do their work, share their work, sell their work, be prepared to teach other people coming, and it really activates a downtown area. All this daytime and evening activity is very attractive to people coming to your community to visit, to see, to shop, and visit and be a part of this sort of cultural experience. In this case, we've suggested setting up a nonprofit organization. It almost operates like a co-op, a bunch of artists getting together in a very low-cost way, operating this set of facilities together. Income is earned by charging rent to artists, taking a commission on sales, having the little cafe and classes. So here again, we crunch the numbers, and we think that you can operate this very impactful facilities for a negligible sort of 12, it needs about 13 to 12 grand a year to sustain it. It's covering most of its operating costs with earned revenue, the rent and other things that I've mentioned. So a very impactful project for a very limited upfront cost and a very limited ongoing cost. Now, then the last of the opportunities is essentially the longer-term one. And we were hired, and part of our brief was, and people in Lee Summit were saying, doesn't Lee Summit need a larger hall? And our answer is, there is insufficient demand for Lee Summit to proceed with the development of a self-standing, larger hall on its own. What we do say is that there is an opportunity to achieve that hall if you find another project that is conceived and that is advancing in which such a hall might be located. So a new school, a library, a conference center, or a community college that needs and wants to build something new. We've seen a number of these partnerships over the years around the country where this project is conceived as advancing, and the city or the community approaches and says, all right, this is terrific what you're doing. We'd like to make a contribution to this project, and in return, make this a good enough hall for our cultural organizations. Essentially invest in that hall in order to buy access for their cultural programs in your community, like the symphony, that are not well served by current facilities, but would be well served in a project like this. So the trick is to be watchful, and when this project arises, to be intelligently opportunistic. That is, to be able to go in and say, we see you've got this idea coming, let's get together and see if it's an idea that's a win-win for both of us. But we also accept the fact that it may be a project that takes years to even be identified, let alone advanced. So our final slide is to say how to move forward. The most important thing about our work is that this is a master plan. It's not a step-by-step, here's the thing that you have to do next month. It's providing you with options and opportunities that you may proceed with over the next 10 years. So now you have to decide which of these, if any, you'd like to proceed with and how you proceed. So working with city staff, we've suggested this idea that you set up a task force to dig a little deeper on some of the site opportunities and partnership opportunities that come with these projects, and then to decide how to move forward, to come back to you with more specific recommendations on individual projects. Which are the ones to proceed with today versus tomorrow? Who are the partners with whom you might advance these? And where's the money going to come from to build, renovate, and sustain? Thank you very much.